Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this panel discussion. And I promise you it was not an alliteration when we chose the topic, India's Pakistan problem post-Pahalgam. And we have with us a very eminent panel to discuss this subject. And of course, to discuss with all of you, we want to make it as participative as possible. What I suggest we do is that I will make some brief introductory remarks and then pass the floor to General Hasnain, Ambassador Saran, and then Professor Mattoo. So I think, without much ado, may I again thank the panelists for sparing their time. It's a very busy period, there are multiple conflicting events, for accepting our invitation, my invitation, to be part of this panel. I think the topic, with no gainsaying, it's a very, very topical subject and something I'm sure that would interest all of you. When I frame the topic, I put it in a way that we can delve into a bit of history too, because that's very important when you discuss current affairs or when you discuss issues relating to Pakistan. There's always good to cross-reference it with incidents in the past. And when I thought of India's Pakistan problem, I'd like to start off by saying that India has always had a Pakistan problem since its inception, since Pakistan's inception. And why do I say that? Because Pakistan, in my opinion, was midwifed by the West, an artificial construct that was midwifed by the West for whatever reason, and there are many reasons, strategic and otherwise. There's one plausible reason is that Pakistan, given its geographic strategic location, is a buffer to, or a very, it's at crossroads really, of very important powers. In those days you had the Soviet Union, you had China, of course you had India, and you had the Arab Gulf, the Arabian Gulf, Iran and the Persian Arabian Gulf. So I think, and Central Asia, of course, was that time very much in the Soviet sphere. So the British, I think, in their wisdom, thought that they would create a country which they could manipulate, perhaps, or at least use as a buffer. And if you read the sort of papers that have been declassified now in London, you will realize that the extent of collusion between people like Winston Churchill and Muhammad Ali Jinnah. So I don't want to go into too much history, but I just preface this discussion with these remarks because I feel it's important to place it in context. So when we've had this Pakistan problem right from the beginning, how have we tackled it? Now, we have tackled it in different ways. The first, and I'm sure General Amitabh would know much more about this than I would, the first Indo-Pak War, 47-48. Now, in wisdom of hindsight, we can write, but people who actually participated in that war, and I'm trying to speak from memory, it was the 13th of November 1947, when Uri was liberated. The Indian Army had reached Uri, and the then Army commander of a new command, it was Delhi and East Punjab Command, which later on became Western Command, the British general called Lieutenant General Sir Dudley Russell. Sir Dudley Russell recommended to Pandit Nehru and the Indian government that the Indian Army should march on towards Muzaffarabad, but before that, blow up the bridge on the Kishan Ganga River at Domel and Kohala, I think that is then advance. And by blowing up the bridges on the Kishan Ganga, they would ensure that there would be no relief coming in very easily from the Pakistan side, because that was the border between Jammu and Kashmir, the erstwhile state of Jammu and Kashmir, and Pakistan. Of course, that was a missed opportunity. Some people say that our lines of supply and communication were very stretched and perhaps we couldn't hold it. Others say that Punch had to be relieved, so the troops had to, and that was what the order was given, to withdraw and relieve the siege of Punch. But there are many who feel that if the Indian Army had advanced toward Muzaffarabad, Punch would have been, the siege would have been relieved in any case because they would have gone to defend Muzaffarabad, a far greater prize than Punch. And can you imagine if Muzaffarabad had fallen at the end of 1947 to the Indian Army? Perhaps, and I use that word perhaps because we may still have had a bit of a POK problem, but largely that would have been resolved. But then these are again events that happened in the past. In the 65 war, we crossed the Chugal Canal and we were near the Bata shoe factory near Lahore. And I know that because I served in Islamabad. I have driven multiple times past Shalimar Bagh, past the B&B Canal, onto the Wagah, to Lahore and to Wagah border. So, I mean, sorry, to the Wagah border because Lahore we've already crossed. So, again, we missed that opportunity. Ceasefire was declared. But these are things, again, that, I mean, Haji Pir Pass, we gave up. So, we've always had a Pakistan problem, but we've never been able to solve it. And over the years, we have tried everything. Believe me, we have tried dialogue, we have tried compromises. If you, it's still classified, but if you ever got to read the Saran Singh Bhutto talks on Kashmir, you would realize the extent to which we were ready to compromise. But that didn't happen. And Pakistan continued to remain a thorn in our flesh. It continues to remain so today. And what has happened on the 22nd of April in Pahalgam, for me personally, it was not a big surprise. The timing certainly was, but not the fact that the terrorists had crossed over from POK or Pakistan and attacked innocent civilians. And of course, before that, put it in context, the so-called self-appointed, perhaps, Field Marshal Asim Munir, his speech a couple of weeks before the Pahalgam incident was quite clear what his intent was, what the Pakistan Army's intent was. And I'm sure you've heard this. Every country has an army. The Pakistan Army has a country, and that's Pakistan. And that is the real problem because democracy has not really taken roots in Pakistan. And even when there is a democratic government in power, it is the Pakistan Army. And just the Pakistan Army, not the Navy, not the Air Force. It's the Pakistan Army that calls the shots. You saw what happened last week when Asim Munir was in the White House, and then Pakistan, the government of Pakistan, he made the government of Pakistan nominate President Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize, and the next day or the day after, the US attacked Iran. So the sort of, it is a rentier state, a state that is available to the highest bidder. And the highest bidder was the United States for most of the time, and then you had China. But they have multiple patrons, they run with their hair and hunt with the hound. And as far as India is concerned, I am the firm belief they are inimically disposed to us. They're very clear that we are the enemy. And until we are able to really appreciate the fact and act accordingly, I'm afraid we will continue to remain a soft state as far as they are concerned. Of course, in the last few years, our posture has changed dramatically, whether it was after Uri or after Pulwama and now after Pahalgam. Our responses have been kinetic and actually been upgraded as we went along. And I leave that to the panelists to explain. But we have this problem, we must tackle it. How do we tackle this problem is something that the panelists would, I'm sure, like to elaborate on. In my opinion, of course, we do have to talk, but whom do we talk to? Talking to the civilian government is more or less a waste of time. I have been personally involved in multiple rounds of dialogue, call it the comprehensive dialogue, the composite dialogue, whatever. We have tried talking on various aspects to without much success. So I think we really need to find a balance where we are prepared to talk, but any action, any militant attacks, terrorist attacks, or misadventures across the IB or LOC would be responded to firmly. by India. Then how do we strike that balance? How do we really find that median whereby we can conduct normal state to state, government to government, people to people relations with our troublesome neighbor is the question that I would request the panelists to address today. So if I will start off, I would request each panelist to take about 15 minutes for their opening remarks, and then we will follow it up with a discussion, Q&A, and we'd like to involve as many of you as possible, time permitting. So with this, I would like to ask my first speaker, and we have a very eminent panel, and I will introduce them as we go on. General Atta Hasnain, Lieutenant General Syed Atta Hasnain was commissioned in 1974 with the Garhwal Rifles, and he is a very eminent general of the Indian Army, a scholar general, if I may say so. He has not only vast experience because he served at various capacities in Kashmir as a colonel. He commanded a brigade as a brigadier. He commanded the 9th Infantry Division in Baramulla as a major general. And of course, he commanded the Corps, the Chinar Corps or the 15th Corps in Srinagar. He is currently, of course, a member of the National Disaster Management Authority. He's also Chancellor of the Central University of Kashmir. And if I try and recall his decorations, because they are something that really worth him, are very decorated officers of the Indian Army. He was awarded the Param Vishisht Seva Medal, the Uttam Yudh Seva Medal, the Ati Vishisht Seva Medal, the Sena Medal, and the Vishisht Seva Medal in Bar. Have I got it correct, General? So I think we're very fortunate to have such an eminent personality who's a public speaker par excellence, who writes, and he's just written 2 articles which I commend for your reading. I'm sure you might have read it. One was in Times of India about prognosis after Operation Sindoor, and the second one in Indian Express called, I think it was Just a Lunch, and that was on Asim Munir's lunch in the White House. General, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, Ambassador Sinha. Thank you so much, Professor Amitabh, Mattoo, Ambassador Saran, and friends here. My pleasure, honor to be on the panel being chaired by an old friend. Frankly, what everyone should know is that we have known each other since 1961, when he was, I don't know how much, 7 years old, maybe 5 years old. Since then, right? We've been friends since then. The subject is a fascinating subject because there's an obsession in India about how to deal with Pakistan. But we never seem to be able to get to grips with it and come to a final answer that this is the way to do it. A lot of people say ultimately go to conventional war and just sort them out. But then the counter-argument comes. Can you achieve final victory, or are you going to get Ukrained, as they call it these days? You know, fight for 2.5 years and see the ruin of your economy, etc., and things like that. I have had a fair amount of experience dealing with the Pakistanis, not only in command of various formations, in the Western Command, in the Northern Command in particular, but also 32 meetings of the Track 2 with them, a lot of Pakistani generals. Couple of observations on Pakistani generals. Number one, almost all of them think they never lost the 71 war, right? They never lost the 71 war. They say, well, what you sorted us out in Bangladesh, we had no air power, we had no armor, we had nothing there. But see what we did to you here. And then when you counter-argue to say we never had our aims to do anything on the Western Front, that doesn't cut ice with them. There's an element of cockiness in them at all times, and they think that they can take you on at any time. Also, they are smart enough. They haven't got down to fighting you conventionally. They've tried it in 65, and despite whatever happened in 65, the 6th of September is still celebrated as Victory Day by Pakistan. That's the day when 3 Jat was actually looking at the Bata factory across the Ichogal Canal on the other side in Lahore. but they declared 6th of September as Victory Day, right? So, I mean, this is an age-old habit of theirs, fudging figures, fudging facts, and anything of that kind which can come their way in terms of achieving something advantageous to themselves. If you really look at the political aims, perhaps assessed political aims that they had in this recent phase of the 88 war day conflict, I've just drawn them out for you. You will realize the element of smartness with which they actually undertake their operations. The political aim, in my assessment, one was the internationalization of Kashmir. They sought to provoke a crisis that could draw international attention to Kashmir, especially in forums like the United Nations, UYSM, etc. And the objective was to revive the relevance of the Kashmir issue post Article 370. The second was to portray India as the aggressor by baiting India into a military response. The third was unifying internal dissent, which was taking place inside Pakistan in a very serious way. The fourth was testing global responses. And the fifth was resetting with key partners, that partners who, they wanted to re-establish themselves with, cement themselves with the United States, China, setting it out and getting the better understanding of their entire manner in which they deal with them. Now, you can see from this that none of this was in terms of conventional operations, launch of conventional kind of a response or anything like that. Everything was hybrid. And that's the nature of, that's the flavor of the season. Everywhere in the world today, no one fights conventional. Actually, you're finding this, a bit of conventional war taking place maybe in Ukraine and partially in the Middle East, but largely it is all hybrid. They fought us hybrid. The whole 1,000 cuts doctrine is all about hybrid war. So, to make a correct assessment of this, there's an old teaching in the army. When you have a problem in front of you, look at it from a military angle, diplomatic angle, political angle, social angle, economic angle, psychological angle. When you see all these domains, you cover it comprehensively. Me being a military man, let me try and do this for you militarily, from a military angle to some extent. We can keep doing very well politically, we can keep doing very well economically, we can keep getting an 11% surge in the overall capability in Jammu and Kashmir, economic capability, etc. But at the end of the day, militarily, have we finally achieved what we wish to achieve? The strength of terrorists in Kashmir in the year 2001, the number of terrorists we killed was 2,100. That's the strength we killed that year. The total strength of terrorists in Kashmir was something about 4,000 that time. Last year, we killed 85. That means we've come down from 2001 to 85, 2100 to 85, which means a huge success that we have been able to really bring down the strength of terrorists to a great extent. But yet, victory eludes us. And that's a very typical thing of hybrid operations, which is what Pakistan is very adept at. So you can keep having a bean count of terrorists, but at the end of the day, you can't count that towards your victory. You can, what I would say from a theory of war angle, you have reached what is called conflict stabilization. And conflict stabilization is a long phase normally in theory of conflict. You have to nudge yourself to achieve what is called conflict resolution and then go to conflict termination. That doesn't seem to be anywhere on the cards at the moment. And all this is in the military domain, which we have not been able to achieve. Pakistan's proxy war structure is still intact, despite setbacks in Operation Sindoor. We can claim that we have destroyed terrorist infrastructure, but the launch pads, the 42 camps, etc., all remain intact still. Why Pakistan did Pahalgam? And everyone knows that it was primarily to seek its lost relevance in Jammu and Kashmir after Article 370. From 2019 till 2025, we had achieved a tremendous amount in winning hearts and minds, outreach to the people, and our perception, we felt Pakistan was losing relevance. That relevance was important to be regained, and Pakistan attempted to do that. Tactical gains by us, manages to push the conflict out from Kashmir into Jammu, from Jammu into Punjab sometimes, comes on the Punjab, Jammu border, comes back into Kashmir, but conflict termination continues to elude. And that's a major challenge for us, because if we have to deal with Pakistan in any way, ultimately we have to ensure that we have to neutralize and negate his capability to fight hybrid against us. He can keep optionalizing between small and big scale operations. The Pahalgam type of operation will always get him a response like Sindoor. I don't know why he was not smart enough to keep it small. But then you realize that perhaps he thinks he can, once in a while, in a cycle of 3 or 5 years, he can make it big and still think that India's response will not be big enough. It will be just about enough that he can always handle it. It happened in 2016, it happened in 2019, it happened in 2025 also. So this is all from the military angle that we are looking at this. I would say a zero strength of terrorists. A lot of people think that you can bring down the strength of terrorists in the valley in Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir, to zero. Let me say that, to my mind, from my experience of almost 30 years there, is next to impossible. You cannot bring it down. There are routes of infiltration always open. There is always some form of radicalization. There is always some form of recruitment which will continue. And a strength of 100 to 150 terrorists is enough to keep a relevance of Pakistan going. They will carry out certain copycat kind of operations. Pahalgam was what I call a copycat operation. What is a copycat operation? He looks at something which has happened internationally or within Pakistan and wants to do that kind of operation against India. And obviously, Pahalgam, the valley in the Saran valley, all these areas are areas of tourism, almost something very similar to what you saw in Gaza, which would happen in that music festival there, when 1,200 people were killed and how many, 250 people were taken hostage. That too was a festivity which was going on. Here too was a festivity which was going on. And they struck us there. So this kind of a thing will always be expected. A lot of people say, why can't we achieve zero terrorism in Kashmir? And I'll quote you the example of Gaza. In an area of 25 kilometers by 40 kilometers, Israel has pounded Gaza into smithereens. There's nothing left in Gaza today. Yet the Hamas has not finished. Yet they are there somewhere. Right? Jammu and Kashmir, South Kashmir is bigger than Gaza. Has many more built up areas comparatively, and the terrain is difficult. There's jungle, there's mountain, there's all kinds of things there. To carry out the operations there, you can put the whole Israeli army there, they'll not be able to achieve that. So, zero terror is something which is very, very difficult to achieve. Let me look at the political diplomatic side. One of the things that Pakistan is very good at is narrative management. You know, spreading its narrative internationally. And one of our biggest problems is that we do not want to discuss the Jammu and Kashmir issue internationally at all, because we feel that under Shimla Agreement, this needs to be done bilaterally. The moment we said that this is to be done bilaterally and do not want to take this internationally anywhere and brief people about, sensitize people about it, obviously we'll immediately hand over on the platter to Pakistan a distinct advantage, because they talk about it openly and they don't even consider Shimla Agreement as an agreement at all. So as a result, what happens is the world seminars from Sydney to San Francisco, every major strategic capital of the world, you will find some activity going on in which Pakistanis will be there. And I love to quote this example where I went to Israel and spoke at the counterterrorism summit at Herzliya, World Summit at Herzliya. That was the first year in 2019 that India was speaking at Jammu and Kashmir in the counterterrorism summit. And I thought, here is a place where Pakistan has no diplomatic relations. So there can't be a Pakistani here on this panel or anywhere here. So obviously we can speak our mind without being countered at all. You'll be surprised, on the morning of that talk, which I had to give, at my breakfast table, 3 Pakistanis joined me. They were there. And I found that there were more Pakistanis in Tel Aviv University than there were Indians. Why I'm trying to say this is, Pakistan has no qualms. They go everywhere. And the government seems to be underwriting travel to any part of the world where it can make a difference. You sit down with others and speak your narrative, give out your narrative. Now, obviously, public relations is a very important part of the hybrid story which Pakistan spins out. And the ISPR, the Inter-Services Public Relations, is a very experienced agency. 1949 it was raised, and they have understood the power of communication, how important, strategic communication, how important it is. That in war, military operations, kinetics is one aspect, no doubt. It's a very, very important aspect. But along with kinetics, unless you got your spin, unless you got your narrative control, all this under your thumb, you are not going to be successful. And this is something that we are not very good at. We are pretty good at military operations, we are very good at diplomacy and things like that, but this is something that if we have to counter the Pakistanis, we have to deal with the Pakistanis everywhere, we got to be smarter on the aspect of strategic communication. And I think one of the strong recommendations that we have always been making is that we need to institutionalize it in India and ensure that our agencies, for example, the Information and Broadcasting Ministry, should be a ministry which should be in control of this completely. The Ministry of Home Affairs, the Ministry of Defense, the MEA, three of them, probably riding with the MIB, needs to take control of this very, very important aspect. Pakistan's relevance internationally, all of us just wonder, why does Pakistan get this importance? Obviously, the Asim Munir lunch is a very different issue. We have seen what has happened in the last 3 days, the ups and downs which have happened in Pakistan's destiny. But the fact still remains that Pakistan's strategic space continues to remain fixed. Is probably the one real estate which is the most important strategic real estate in the world. There are 5 civilizations which come and meet around. I just recently wrote about it. 5 civilizations. You see the Indian civilization on one side, the Chinese, the Central Asian, the Persian, and the Arab. 5 civilizations meeting at one place, right? The United States, which is not even a remote civilization anywhere near, could not have fought this war in Afghanistan for 21 years without the support of Pakistan. So obviously, when Asim Munir is called by Donald Trump, there is a history behind it. Cito Cento, they realized in the 50s, they were part of it. Gary Powers, with his U-2 flight to Peshawar, was part of it, right? We are not recommending that India has to ride on the United States or get cozy up with the United States in a tactical way and give a recommendation for the Nobel Prize to Donald Trump. India doesn't have to worry about all this. Strategically, we are far too important and we should just leave it aside. I think we need to understand that our relationship with the United States is strategic and that's how it should remain. Pakistan will have a relationship which is tactical from time to time, and that's how it will be. Same with the Chinese. The Chinese is a very important aspect of their relationship with the Chinese. The last bit, if you have to ensure that you get your final victory in Jammu and Kashmir, or whatever, I mean, the sense 80-90% control over the situation, and you can say that, yes, our narrative runs completely here after Article 370 abrogation. It has largely been so. But you will have to control the outreach to the people. You will have to control the narratives within. You will have to make sure that the radical ideology, which is one of the ways by which Pakistan does its outreach inside the valley, that remains neutralized. After 2019, we did a brilliant job in neutralizing the various networks, the overground worker network, the financial network, the media network, all these, the separatist networks. Many of these networks may be attempting to try and coming back. This is what we have to ensure, that they are not kind of allowed to raise their heads anytime. So, at the end of the day, we have to have a proper psychological warfare machineries. We have to counter radicalization. We have to continue ensuring our socio-economic outreach within Jammu and Kashmir, and be prepared to ensure that our asymmetry with Pakistan remains intact and only increases in terms of ratio. Because at the end of the day, unless Pakistan feels that it cannot win against India in an asymmetric situation, in a conventional asymmetric situation, till then Pakistan will always continue to follow its policy of 1,000 cuts or whatever it wants to do, and have its cockiness among its various general officers. I think I'll stop there. If I've done number 15, then stop. I'll stop there, and we'll take it further in the question hour.
Thank you, General. That was really very illuminating. I think you food for thought for the discussions that will follow. But can I now introduce my next speaker, the next speaker on the panel, Ambassador Pankaj Saran. Pankaj Saran is not only a dear friend, but also an illustrious colleague who joined the Foreign Service in 1982, and after over 36 years, retired from the Foreign Service, but that was not the end of his, it was the end of one innings, and he was then appointed the Deputy National Security Advisor in 2018, and he served in that capacity till 2021. But in his Foreign Service career, he was ambassador to Russia before he retired from the Foreign Service, and before that, High Commissioner to Bangladesh. Again, two very important and sensitive assignments. He has served as Joint Secretary in the Prime Minister's office. He was also posted in missions in Washington, in Cairo, Moscow earlier, and comes with a wealth of experience in international diplomacy and strategic affairs. He is currently a member of the National Security Advisory Board, which was recently constituted, and is also coordinator of a think tank called NatStrat. Pankaj, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Harsh. Sorry, Yash. It's a great pleasure to be part of this panel, a very distinguished panel, General Hasnain, Amitabh, and all the distinguished members of the audience. Thank you very much for your generous introduction. The problem is that despite all this experience, I still do not have a solution to the Pakistan problem. So it comes to mind, what do we do after having lived with this for the last 78 years? Have we become any wiser in our understanding and in our strategy? Or is the proposition that we live with this problem and we manage it instead of wasting our time trying to find a solution? In my own experience, I should admit, Pakistan always brought the worst out of me. It's rare for such things to happen, but there are some in your life who literally bring the worst out of you. My tendency used to be to not engage too much with Pakistani counterparts. The problem was that when you met them on a negotiating table or in a negotiating room, they showed one aspect of their personality, which was hostility. But outside of the room, they would lapse into Punjabi and Urdu, and of course they would destroy the Urdu language, which was very painful to the ear. But then they had this kind of split personality, and they would expect us to play along by saying, you know, that was business, this is real life. So this duplicity was very taxing as far as I'm concerned. And also just to narrate some personal, I mean, I was in the PMO, you were GSPI. We've jointly sat in many summit meetings between the then Prime Minister, Dr. Singh, and various Pakistani presidents and prime ministers. And And so I would second what you said, that we did whatever could possibly be done to find some modus vivendi to live with Pakistan, but all this is clearly insufficient. Now the question we have to ask is it our fault? If you ask a Pakistani, he'll say that the fault is with India. It's the way we think. It's the problem lies in our great power delusions. Some Western commentators have recently written about that. The problem lies in the fact that India seeks to dominate the South Asian region, etc. So I think the mental distance between India and Pakistan seems to be just growing over time. So leaving aside the geographical distance or proximity, it's just that the visions of our own selves are changing and moving apart from each other to an extent where it is becoming very difficult to sit across a table and find even the minimum common denominator for a dialogue. Now, with that kind of introduction, let me just share a few thoughts. I was very privileged to be part of one of the outreach parliamentary delegations, and I can share with you the experience we had. I was part of the delegation to Europe. We visited 6 countries. My takeaway is basically what was said and what was not said were both very important. But my takeaway is that, listen, sort it out. We're not interested. It's for you to sort out this problem, number one. Number two, do it quickly. I mean, don't get us involved in this. Don't prolong this agony for us. And whatever you have to do, just keep it under wraps. International appetite for the India-Pakistan dispute is really almost non-existent. That's the first takeaway. And the second was that, frankly, no one is going to solve this problem for us. We have to do it ourselves. And that's what was. The third thing, of course, was there was no prescription given, unlike, say, 10, 20 years ago, that, you should do this and you should do that. And so there was pro forma polite suggestions that, maybe you should talk to them, etc. But nothing prescriptive of the kind that we have heard when we were in service and working on Pakistan. Interestingly, no one, in my recollection, used the Kashmir or the K word. No one even hinted that, the root cause theory is a valid one and you should actually address Kashmir, and it is time you kind of focused on the source of the problem. So it was quite remarkable that no one in that entire tour, even in London, mentioned the Kashmir issue. One of the things, of course, we did say to them, as you have brought out, and General Hasnain, in this span of, let's say, so many decades, or let's say after 71, we've done whatever was possible. We've tried all permutations, combinations. And so we put that across in our tour to Europe and said, for example, that in 2008, when Mumbai happened, there was nothing that we had done to you. I mean, we were on our own trajectory. We had just signed the nuclear deal with the United States. We were doing economically well. You had a government which was, let's say, not a Hindutva government. It was secular, it was liberal. Everything that you want today was present in 2008. So why then did you do 2008? So the explanation cannot then be that the reason why 25 has happened, or 19 or 16, is because of a change of government or a certain complexion of the government in Delhi, because you have been equal opportunity abusers. You have done it regardless of whichever government was in Delhi, whether it was a BJP or a Congress or a Janata Dal or whoever. So that's the argument that they have been using across in their campaigns are manifold, including, as I said, that India is today under occupation of a certain kind of a government, a certain kind of political ideology, which is most inimical to the Indian Muslim. It is intolerant, and the rest of it all. So what we tried to do was to say that that is not true, because you kind of have been doing these things in a cyclical pattern. So what are the takeaways, which was the title of your panel, and the subject is the post-Pahalgam situation. I think there are some good takeaways for us from this whole situation. I think firstly, we have been able to smoke out Pakistani military power and hard power, which is good. You need to do that once in a while. Tabletop exercises, gaming, scenario building is all very good. But once in a while, you really need to test things out. And it's good that we managed to smoke out what they're worth. And I'm sure our military has drawn very useful lessons from their capabilities. Second, I think, is in the same vein, also to smoke out the quality and the extent of the China-Pakistan military intelligence, ISR, so to say, fusion. This also is very useful for us to know, because it's good to have these periodic checks of how much is happening in real life, apart from whatever our own internal intelligence estimates are. Third, I think, is the US position in some ways has come out of the closet. It's again a good reality check as far as we are concerned. In a sense, it's helped us to remove our strategic blinders and our blind spots. And so from a strategic point of view, it's a very good reality check for us. The other takeaway, of course, is that with the Trump-Munir meeting, the talk of a dialogue between India and Pakistani leaderships, I think, stands practically buried, because I literally cannot see a television image of a meeting between Prime Minister Modi and Field Marshal Munir happening. So I think, luckily for us, I think that story seems to have been buried with the lunch. Secondly, of course, I think within Pakistan, I'm not sure how Shehbaz Sharif is sleeping at night, because if anyone has been more insulted, it is him. So how long will this duopoly survive is another question. The other takeaway for us, I think, is we've been able to test very well our own capabilities. And I think people are doing a fantastic forensics of what we did right, what we should do better, and where we need to go. Lastly, of course, we blew the nuclear bluff. I think that was really important, because we, even till today, and I'm sure it will continue, the narrative, and it's interesting, that every Pakistani commentator, strategic expert, begins and ends with the fact that this is a problem between two nuclear powers. So in their minds, they are really playing to the Western gallery by hyping up the nuclear dimension of both countries. But I think what we've been able to do very successfully this time around, more than in 19, is to call the nuclear bluff in terms of the escalation space that we have. what happens now? I think clearly we have to be prepared for a more militarized and a more hardened Pakistan. They will be pressing the accelerator in doing more of whatever they think they should be doing. But I think they face a challenge also at the same time, because they had two basic pillars or instruments to use against India. One, of course, was, as General Hasnain said, the asymmetric 1,000 cuts or terrorism, whichever word you want to give it. And the second was the protection under the nuclear umbrella. And I think both of these today stand weakened, because they realize that these instruments seem to be getting dated, and they need to develop new instruments of offense against India, which go beyond terrorism and beyond, of course, the nuclear capability. My own view is they will move rapidly towards greater and non-traditional areas like narcotics, exploitation of India's domestic internal fault lines, cyber warfare, space warfare, and the use of economic instruments, including now digital currencies, etc. So they will have with them, and they will try to develop a bigger arsenal of instruments because they realize that this giant is too big to swallow, so they need to develop a whole array of opinions. On the Kashmir issue, my assessment from watching and hearing everything is it's a dead issue. No one in the world is interested, not the Arabs, not the Gulf, not Iran, not the United States, not Russia. Maybe we can talk about China. And of course, the Pakistanis are also not interested because they don't want a solution. The current state of affairs is their solution, because they come back at you, they have you, they think, vulnerable in an area which is a good beating dog, stick to beat India with. But otherwise, whether it's the United Nations or diplomatic and so on, there is no appetite left. So they can, waste their time and run around talking Kashmir. I don't think anyone is listening. There is much more at stake as far as India is concerned. So that's basically what I wanted to say. The only thing also, it is important, just as an aside, since it's been mentioned, the famous lunch, I think it's important to piece together the crime scene. I mean, I think it's important for us to trace back and analyze what led to the lunch and what was brewing from the 20th of January since Donald Trump became president. So this has been work in progress from the 20th of January till the day of the lunch. It didn't happen overnight. So the question to ask, therefore, is what was the preparatory part of the lunch process on the 22nd of April? What was the state of affairs when they were fixing this lunch on the 16th of April, when Munir made that famous speech about the two nations being different? So was it also, it needs to be asked, the question at least needs to be asked, that did he have, and what degree of comfort had he already arrived at between him and his outreach to the Trump inner circle by the 16th of April? And the actual act on the 22nd of April was well timed with the visit of Vance, and obviously he was also well prepared for an Indian response, an Indian kinetic military response. So I think we need to study that a little more to get a better idea of his behavior. Lastly, I would say on the future, I think we really need to get on with our lives. There's little point in, consuming ourselves with this this problem. I don't see it going away. I don't see a solution. We have to adopt different ways. Both, as General Hasnain said, you have to have hard power, you have to have other attributes of national power, and you just have to race ahead of them in whatever you are doing and do it well. Because the fact of the matter is that despite all the 1,000 cuts and everything else, the person who's actually been cut the worst is not us, it's them. So if they have reached the stage of bankruptcy and everything else and facing multiple crises, it just shows that the snakes, literally, as they have said, as people have said, have come home to bite them. So I'll just stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Pankaj. That was really exhaustive and comprehensive, and reminds me of your last part, particularly about the honorable mention that I got in WikiLeaks in 2010, telling Usra Syed, that time the political counselor in the US Embassy, that even if you hand Kashmir in a platter to Pakistan, they will come up with some other issue to roil you with. But thank you so much. May I invite the next speaker, Professor Amitabh Mattoo. Professor Mattoo is not only a celebrated academician, political thinker, strategic affairs writer. He is written on various issues, including modern contemporary history, political science, international relations. He was the youngest Vice Chancellor of any public university in India when he was appointed Vice Chancellor of the Jammu University in 2002. Currently, of course, he is the Dean of the School of International Studies in JNU. And before that, he was the founder director of the Australia-India Institute in the University of Melbourne. And I also discovered this morning that he was a visiting professor at Stanford, the University of Notre Dame, and I think the University of Illinois in Champaign in Illinois, right? Southern Illinois, I think. No, but Illinois. Urbana-Champaign, yes, that's the university. So, and he's written books. He's written books on India's nuclear policy, on India-Pakistan relations, and we look forward to hearing from you, Professor Mattoo. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for those very kind words, Ambassador Sinha. And let me also begin on a personal note. In my experience, the best chancellor, and present company excluded, the best chancellor that I have had the opportunity to serve, and certainly the best governor that I saw at close quarters, was your great father, Lieutenant General Sinha. I keep saying this, that there is no one with the same degree of administrative acumen, statesmanship in public life that I have witnessed during that period, and it was a privilege and an honor to serve as a Vice Chancellor under him. And I knew you from his descriptions of you as not only an outstanding son, but a great diplomat. And I remember when he visited you in Venezuela while he was governor. It is a great honor to be part of this panel, along with Ambassador Pankaj Saran, a great diplomat, someone who has tremendous experience in national security issues, and General Hasnain, who's a legendary figure in terms of his contributions as the Corps Commander of the Chinar Corps, as well as his Operation Sadbhavna, which endeared him to the ordinary people of Jammu and Kashmir, and of course today even as his role as the Vice Chancellor of the Central University of Kashmir. Let me say, and I shall not try and not overlap and repeat what has been said, so I will give you a more or less an academic perspective. I think the fact is that the recent attack in Pahalgam was not just a terrorist incident, it was a political shockwave. Primarily because I think much of the strategic community had imagined that somehow the Pakistan problem was behind us. Someone reminded me the other day that in all the high-profile dialogues that were held in Delhi in the first months of this year, the Raisina dialogue, the Carnegie dialogue, several other dialogues, not once was the word Pakistan mentioned. It was as if Pakistan didn't exist. And so Pakistan has re-entered our strategic space almost with the proverbial vengeance, and in a manner that threatens all aspects of our aspirations in terms of our foreign policy and in terms of our worldview. What is more dangerous is that Pakistan today is neither a rational unitary actor nor a failed state in a classical sense. And we can go through this while we discuss it after the presentation. It is instead very precisely a garrison, fragmented hybrid regime where military tutelage, ideological radicalization, and externalized insecurity form the triad of its statecraft. Military tutelage, ideological radicalization, and externalized insecurity. India's Pakistan problem, therefore, ladies and gentlemen, is not episodic. Pahalgam will come and go, but it's systemic, embedded in the very structure of Pakistan's civil-military imbalance, ideological identity crisis, which is really defined in anti-India terms, and regional strategy of denial. Unless we comprehend the reality of Pakistan, we will not be able to arrive at a solution to our Pakistan problem. So let me make, in that fashion, 7 to 8 points in precisely 1.5 minutes each to stick to my 15 minutes deadline. Let me begin with also reminding you of the great diplomat, statesman George Kennan, what he said in the initial stage of the Cold War, in the initial years of the Cold War about the Soviet Union. And he's the one who wrote that famous article in Foreign Affairs under the pseudonym Mr. X. He wrote, "They lie not only to us, but to themselves, and so the danger persists." So therefore, Pahalgam calls for not a reactive lament, but a deeper rethinking of our doctrine, diplomacy, and deterrence vis-a-vis Pakistan. We must bring to bear not just the full weight of international relations theory, military practice, history, and foresight in thinking through what is going to be an enduring challenge. In international relations, it's fashionable to describe state-to-state insecurities in terms of the framework of realism, which is defined as conflict due to the lack of trust. But another theory which is equally important perhaps is the regime security theory, which suggests that Pakistan's actions are not just designed to balance or threaten India, but to protect the primacy of the military within its own polity. Hence, cross-border terrorism becomes a tool of regime preservation. In other words, the army needs it as part of its raison d'etre. So not merely a foreign policy, but a domestic policy to gain legitimacy within. Therefore, and that comes to deterrence, reimagining deterrence beyond nuclear orthodoxy. India's traditional posture of minimum credible deterrence was designed to stabilize a dyadic relationship. But Pakistan's full-spectrum deterrence, coupled with proxy warfare, has created a strategic inversion. India's doctrinal evolution represents a shift towards proactive, coercive diplomacy within the nuclear shadow, yet the threshold remains ambiguous. The Pahalgam incident raises the question, can India credibly threaten unacceptable retaliation without risking disproportionate escalation? How do you manage escalation without creating instability? Now, each look at the historical lessons, and we've talked about the historical lessons. Each crisis from Kargil to Balakot demonstrates the cyclic nature of conflict. Provocation, Indian restraint, international mediation, Pakistani denial, and return to status quo. India's strategic patience must evolve from tactical retaliation to a long-term strategy of political and economic encirclement. In this context, the Modi doctrine, which are the three anchors of the Modi doctrine, was that terrorism will be seen as an act of war, no distinction between non-state actors and in India's and the state of Pakistan in India's Pakistan policy. No veto by escalation. Pakistan's nuclear deterrent will not paralyze India's response. India will not submit to nuclear blackmail. And no reward for disruption, no bilateral engagement under terrorism's shadow. This is a political doctrine and a military doctrine of disengagement and containment. But what if you were a management graduate, what kind of a SWOT analysis would you do? The strengths of the SWOT of the Modi doctrine is the following. One, it's assertive signaling, there's political clarity, and it depends on your strategic autonomy. You're not going to depend on other people's foreign policy. The weaknesses are it escalates risk, limits diplomatic flexibility. What are the opportunities? And the opportunities, as Ambassador Saran pointed out, was that it aligns with the global fatigue over Pakistan, minus Trump and the current state of the US administration, opens up space for partnerships with other countries who are similarly fatigued, although I think that is something that we need to explore more in discussion, is how is it that Pakistan is still able to have such strong friends, including in the White House, and why hadn't we second-guessed the fact that there were going to be lobbyists working to Pakistan's advantage, whether it was through crypto or whether it was through giving the United States promised access to critical minerals. Why couldn't our intelligence agencies second-guess that this is what Pakistan was going to do, that these were the kind of levers that Pakistan could exercise, when it was obvious even in the early months of the Trump administration that there were lobbyists around Trump and the Trump family extension who were working closely on behalf of Pakistan. But beyond this, is there a Modi doctrine plus, which are strategic levers beyond the military? We haven't talked about water diplomacy. I'm surprised that that is something that we began with, leveraging the Indus Water Treaty. What are we going to do about it? Suddenly it seems to have been taken onto the back burner. Are we doing anything about it? Have we decided to put it back in the back burner, or is it still part of a policy response that we are going to escalate now or later? We are almost on the cusp of a monsoon. What are we going to do in the next few months through either releasing more water to flood the plains of the Punjab, or even in this cusp period, denying of water to whatever extent we can under the existing conditions? What are we doing by way of economic disengagement in terms of greater cutting off of informal trade routes beyond the Dubai, South Africa, beyond the other trade routes? There are still instances where Pakistani goods come into the Indian markets. What are we doing in terms of strengthening our FAT corporation, the federal task force on finances, on terrorism? And what are we doing by way of regional bypassing? What are we doing by way of information warfare and cyber warfare? The fact is, whether we like it or not, and I think General Hasnain referred to it and Ambassador Pankaj Saran referred to it as well, is that in terms of the narrative, global narrative is an objective observer of events, and as much as anyone can be objective, Pakistan's story seems to have captured the imagination of at least a section When this story is so distorted, patently false, why has it captured the imagination? Why is its sense of victimhood found an audience, even if it is in a marginal, even if it's in a complete small constituency of so-called Pakistani supporters? Now, on Kashmir, I think it's important that we must continue doing what General Hasnain and others had started doing, which is engage, institutionalize, and strengthen the democratic process. Because even though there is an exhaustion with Kashmir, as Ambassador Pankaj Saran said, no one wants to interfere, it is the right thing to do and it is the strategic thing to do, because once you have a population which is at peace with itself and prosperous, that's the best argument that you can have for punishing Pakistan or those who try and disrupt the peace. I know that one of the weakest parts of our narrative has been the lack of hard evidence, but I was in Srinagar and I know that the NIA is on the verge of hopefully cracking that case, because if you do have hard evidence which will demonstrate Pakistani complicity, the strength of your narrative will, I think, multiply significantly. At least what the NIA officers on the ground, without breaking any confidences, suggest that within a few weeks they will have hard, solid ground evidence to demonstrate that the Pakistani support in letter and spirit. What are the 4 scenarios that you can think in terms of the future of India's Pakistan problem? One is this controlled hostility, a Cold War, a status quo, proxy attacks, calibrated response, no talks. Then is the one which everyone thinks of, the Cassandra, of the dangers or the Cassandras in the West think of, which is the escalatory spiral. Miscalculation leading to military exchange, or a major crisis in which could be potentially cross over to beyond the nuclear threshold. In any case, I think India has to demonstrate and credibly demonstrate to Pakistan, because part of the whole logic of deterrence is credible communication, that we can dominate every step on the escalatory ladder. Until Pakistani army is convinced that we can achieve dominance at every step, they will not be deterred. The third is a managed détente. Not likely as it seems, but that you have a beginning of quiet diplomacy, largely because of global developments. And the final is, of course, an internal collapse. Pakistan descends into fragmentation or Talibanization, or what my friend Parvez Hoodboy used to say, a Somalia with nuclear weapons. India's Pakistan problem is a political pathology. What is needed is a long-term strategy, and we really do not have a long-term strategy. A long-term strategy where India does not just show its strength, but consistency of purpose. We must signal that terror will no longer be a low-cost strategy for Pakistan, and unfortunately, even after Operation Sindoor, at least the narrative within the Pakistani media, or whatever little you get access of today, suggests that there are no lessons learned. We have to demonstrate that every drop of blood in Pahalgam or any other terrorist incidents has consequences, not in metaphor, but in missile, in memory, and in mandate. What Rawalpindi must understand is that we do not seek war, but we will not be prisoners of caution. If Pakistan's strategy is to bleed India, as someone talked about, by 1,000 cuts, our answer must be the age of bleeding is over. Now begins the age of reckoning. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mattoo. That was you put the whole discussion in a very strategic construct and made it easier for a lot of us to sort of question you on certain areas that you highlighted. Um, Before I proceed further, I'd be remiss, I was remiss in not mentioning that Professor Mattoo is the recipient of the Padma Shri in 2008, and among his many other accomplishments. But the 2 points that I would like to highlight, which you made, which we didn't, and none of us touched upon initially in our discussion, was the Indus Water Treaty and holding it abeyance. But that's very important. And I think people have now, because a lot of water has flowed down the Indus, people have forgotten that we actually held it in abeyance, which has a lot of implications because I was India's co-agent for the Kishan Ganga arbitration at the Permanent Court of Arbitration at The Hague. So I'm aware of the nuances there, and I think if we are, I'm not sure whether we will be able to hold this position for too long. However, the fact that Pakistan is now coming literally, their Secretary of Water Resources has written to our Secretary of Water Resources pleading for talks, clearly shows that it is a measure that has actually hit them and will hit them in the future. And the second point on democracy, I think that's, you talked about the J&K, the situation in the valley, and very correctly stated that you need not just a stable democratic exercise that has already happened, but stability, political stability, accompanied by economic prosperity. Because still there is a vested interest of the people in being with India and the Indian Union and the benefits that accrue to them. And that was the best, perhaps, answer to Pakistan. And I feel perhaps that was one of the reasons why the ISI indulged in the misadventure it did to the Lashkar-e-Taiba in Pahalgam. But with these words, I'd like to thank all the three panelists for really highlighting the various issues, very complicated because our relations with India and Pakistan, I mean, cannot be discussed over a period of an hour and a half. But thank you very much for all your perspectives. I think it has really given the people attending, all of you, a food for thought and to perhaps frame your discussions, your questions around what has been said and what perhaps has not been said. My only request is that first we will take 3 questions at a time for the panel. If you have a preference for a particular panelist, please indicate it. Otherwise, rely on my judgment. And 2, please be very brief. State your name, and if you want the organization you represent, otherwise just your name is good enough. But please make it very brief because we want to give everybody here and those who want to participate in the discussion a chance. And we are time bound, so I'd really request that you make it brief. So we'll take the first 3 questions, comments, briefly. Even if they are comments, they must be brief. Otherwise, I shall exercise my prerogative as the chair to cut the speaker short. If you don't, and I apologize for that in advance because we need to give everybody an opportunity. So I see one hand raised, so I will take 3, 1, 2, and 3. Please introduce yourself briefly, just your name, and please put your questions very briefly to the panelists. Thank you.
Bhai, I'd like to know whether Hindutva has played any role in international reactions to what happened in Pahalgam. That is one. And number 2, what about the civilian population in Pakistan? If they are suffering so much, I'm told that in madrasas, the rising generation of children is brainwashed. But what about the effect of social media, the digital revolution which is going on? It's hard to believe that they will not be affected by views coming across the border from India to Pakistan. Don't they have any effect on the civilian population? Is it all army all the time? And it's pretty hard to believe, lastly, that the Kashmir issue is dead, because I can't imagine how they can get any support from the international community without talking about Kashmir. Thank you.
Thank you. Second, please go ahead.
My question is...
please introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Syed, and I do have a house in Jammu, Kashmir, in Bator, belonging to my great-grandfather's time. My great-grandfather was the treasury officer to Maharaja Hari Singh in Kashmir. And what I feel now, that still it is really not very safe for a common man to go and settle in, especially in Srinagar. When I go there, if you take a taxi, he asks you, you come from India? They don't consider you as your local people. Then I tell them, no, I have a house in Mattoo. I'm from Jammu, Kashmir. So when will situation improve for any average Indian citizen to go and start living in Jammu and Kashmir? Because after Pahalgam, there is a big fear. Although the common people living in Srinagar, they are pro-India and they are very upset after what happened in Pahalgam. Their business collapsed and poverty is there, whether we accept it or not. Is government of India going to do anything to improve the situation so people start loving the country as India for the prosperity they get from the country?
Thank you. Please go ahead.
My name is Pahalgam. I'm pursuing undergraduation from that university. Firstly, I'm thankful to all the esteemed panelists I could listen to and understand with my limited capabilities. I would like to know the panel's take on the Balochistan issue and its impact on India-Pak relation and the proxy hybrid operations which are carried out by Pakistan against India.
Good. So we take the first three questions. Can I, Pankaj, the first question about Hindutva and the impact that had in the reaction that you got abroad and the population and social media, I can take that, but you're most welcome to address that also.
No, it's a good question, good point, about this. They are playing this card very aggressively. So it's a 2-3 pronged talking point. One, of course, is Kashmir, but that is like a repeated cycle and a record. So it has limited resonance now as compared to, say, 10, 20 years ago. But the new card they have picked up is this Hindutva and targeting the Prime Minister and painting him in the worst possible light and also talking about the condition of Indian Muslims. So this is having some resonance in some sections of the West, in the media and the think tanks, etc. And they are obviously exaggerating it. But it is not as if the balance is tipping over to the point where these same Western constituencies are ready to put India on the dock. So it's more of listening, but yes, they are using it. They are seeing it almost as a mirror image of what they think we are doing, which is by targeting their military and talking about their dictatorship and their generals, etc. So, but I don't think we should take it too seriously or be too worried about it, because as I said, their record as far as we are concerned has been same with or without Hindutva. If you look at the 20, 30, 40-year history, and this is the point we made, that if the argument is that it is because of a certain kind of government in Delhi, it doesn't hold true. But the empirical data is to the contrary. On the civil population, maybe you can answer, but frankly, my own view is that it has actually become quite immaterial. But the indoctrination is very much part and parcel of the kind of shaping of a full society vis-a-vis India. And I think we're beginning to see traces of that in Bangladesh also. Not so much, but I think they have taken it to a much more advanced level. So, if you talk about a 20-year-old Pakistani today, I think he's growing up with this education. And I think what Munir said that day, he meant it, that we are two different nations and different ambitions and this and that. So I think it's getting hardwired. And so our own illusions about some amity or a people to people, I think we should temper it really.
Information across the border is not flowing through.
Can I just take that? I think there is a control as much as possible of the narrative in Pakistan, because as Ambassador was mentioning, that they're indoctrinated. Their school curriculum to teachers, and I'm not talking about the madrasas, I'm talking about the normal schools, about how India is the eternal enemy. So they were able to control the narrative. General Hasnain mentioned that in the 1971, what the people believed that they actually won. And I have lived in Pakistan for 3 years, so I know that they actually believe 65, of course, is Victory Day, 6th of September, but even in 71, they ignore Bangladesh. They think they want. So that is the control that they have, the narrative. And because they've been taught from childhood that India is the enemy, you don't believe anything that comes on Indian television. And our television didn't really channel, some of them at least, didn't cover themselves in glory in the last the Operation Sindoor time. But anyway, I wanted you to,
On the social media.
Sure.
I wonder if you've been in a madrasa ever. Have you ever been near a madrasa? I don't know how many people have been near a madrasa. My first experience in the madrasa in Jammu and Kashmir. Let me tell you, the concept of happiness does not exist. Right? It's a morbid existence which carries on day by day, by rote, studying by rote, anything. My way of trying to break it in my area of responsibility was to visit a madrasa with lots and lots of sports equipment, reading material. I even gifted a television. No one has a mobile phone inside. If you're thinking social media is going to affect a child in a madrasa, no, it's not. He doesn't even know that he may be visiting home sometime and then has a look at a mobile phone. But inside, there's no question of this. So if you have to make madrasa culture, of course, in Pakistan, this is very much existent. In Baramulla, I can tell you, one of the ways that I adopted was to ensure that the madrasa trained a football team. They trained a march past contingent to come and participate on the Republic Day and sing the national anthem while you raise the national flag. These are the ways of doing it. But otherwise, the perception generally exists that, with social media today, they would have penetrated inside madrasas and there would be a change in thinking. That doesn't happen. If I may answer this question on safety in Srinagar. So, the issue is, first of all, lots of people are pushing back, no doubt today, by going back to Kashmir. There are lots of photographs in today's media where people in Sonmarg, they're on pony rides and things like that. The Amarnath Yatra starts on the 3rd of July. My teams from the NDMA are already there, going to conduct a couple of exercises on disaster, etc. So everyone is pushing back on this. But at the end of the day, as if I was a security manager or leading the security thing, I would still be wary. Because you see, intelligence-wise, there was a time when I was looking after South Kashmir, when my day used to start with intelligence intercepts of all kinds of communications that the terrorists were making. That doesn't exist today. Spoofing, all kinds of ways have been found. Chinese radio sets have come in, Chinese mobiles have come in. You cannot even break them at the moment. That is where your intelligence is not available to you. You had no inkling of Pahalgam because of this kind of a thing. So while there may be a change after Article 370, a lot of people may be changing their minds, coming, looking at the mainstream and things like that. A one-off, for this kind of a thing like Pahalgam, you need a one-off event with 3 people leading that event. And therefore, insecurity will always be there. I don't foresee a sudden change taking place there in the next couple of years.
Thank you. Can I ask Professor Mattoo to address that same question on living in Kashmir, because we have Kashmir on the panel, and Professor Mattoo has just come back from Srinagar after 2 or 3 weeks there, and also the question on Balochistan, if I may. So if you could address both the question the other gentleman asked on Balochistan and the Kashmir.
Mr. Chaudhary, is it? Yeah. I think Batot is a lovely place. I wouldn't want to settle down in Srinagar if you have a house in Batot.
Now after the buses don't go via Batot,
Yeah.
it's become very lonely.
Yeah, but otherwise, Batot, even in terms of the population demographics, it's primarily it's a Hindu, Pahari dominated area. So even in terms, and there have been hardly any incidents of militancy in Batot in the last 10 years. So I would encourage you to go back, restore your house, have a Airbnb or something so that we can all go and visit you there. But Kashmir Valley is, you see, the point is that it's a work in progress. It's not, if you think that 370 in the last 5 years have suddenly changed the reality on the ground, there is a certain, Delhi ki duri, which the Prime Minister himself talked about, it's still there. There is a disconnect, there is a certain degree of lack of communication. The fact that the Kashmiri Pandits had to leave and have not returned still has created a vacuum there. So if you were going to Srinagar and assuming that there are no questions about identity, but frankly speaking, it doesn't matter to me when someone says, "Aap India se aaye hain." Even earlier, the Sikh dhaba owner in Patnitop used to say, "Aap India se aaye hain." That's the greatness of India, and that's the greatness of any federation, that you have a sense of your own identity, but that melts into the greater sense of Indian identity. But there is much more you can do by strengthening democracy, by strengthening multiculturalism, pluralism. That's why I think it's still a work in progress, and we have to continue to do the work. And what Pakistan will do is to try and ensure that you are not able to complete that work through incidents like Pahalgam, which are so damaging. Even though it's one terrorist incident, it mars the image of Pahalgam, of Kashmir as a sacred tourist space. Secondly, I think the question of Baluchistan, you see, the fact is Pakistan was created in the areas where there was least demand for Pakistan, where Muslims are in a majority, but they didn't feel insecure. The Pakistan was created by the Muhajirs of UP and Bihar, where they were in insecurity, where they were minorities who felt insecure about their identity. Baluchistan was always the Wild West. The Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, similarly, there was hardly any great support for the Muslim League in the initial days. You had Ghaffar Khan in Baluchistan, you had the Mangails and the other tribal chieftains who used to dominate. Even in Sindh, there was a greater Sindh movement. Even in Punjab, you had a united Punjab movement which had one considerable number of seats. So Pakistan was a geographical monstrosity created in areas where there was no support. The only reason why it came together was the cement of Islam, or so-called cement of Islam, which Bangladesh demonstrated is not cement good enough. It's not enough of a glue to bind the people of Pakistan together. And they had no other political architecture thought of or imagined other than Islam as being a unifying bond. India, tragically, is filling that vacuum. It fills in the vacuum to provide legitimacy to the army, which is the most important, powerful institution in Pakistan, and it also provides the glue. And that's where I disagree, that it's not a question of not having access to information from India. The anti-India sentiment within the Western, liberal, educated Pakistanis is also there. And when you have an incident like this, it rallies people around the flag. Today, the Pakistani army is probably more popular than it was in Pakistan than it was before Operation Sindoor. Take it from me, an academic who has no other West point of view. It's a rally around the flag impact.
Yes.
Good. I think the Donald Kalam also, he actually didn't want to accede, but Jinnah, I believe, was his lawyer, ensured through whatever means that he was forced to accede to Pakistan. But sorry, can I just take some other questions? First, Mr. Mitra, and then Mr. Chagwal, and Sinha. So,
I'm Devashish Mitra from Saudi Foundation from Faraway Bhubaneswar. I have a question which probably will recall Ambassador Saran. We've heard about Pakistan's strategic depth in Afghanistan and so on. But Bangladesh seems to be the new part of where they're creating strategic depth. So first is that how aware are we about this? It seems very quick for them to have moved their ISI and the other operatives. And you're seeing movements of the US and the Pakistanis visiting Bangladesh at the same time, and it can't be, I guess, just a question of coincidence. That's the first question. The second is that, I'm writing a book connecting the three partitions of Bengal in 1905, 12, 47, and 71. My father was part of the 71 operations. But what is interesting for people there is, and for ordinary Indians like us, that when the Bangladesh problem happened, there were 15,000 Indian students who were stuck in Bangladesh. Now, what are Indian students going there to study for? The first question. And similarly, recently you may have picked up that in Iran, we had a lot of students also who were studying who were just moved. Now, my information is that a lot of these students were from Kashmir, both in Bangladesh as well as in Iran. And a lot of them were also those who were studying to be doctors. Now, the question is, we also know about Ukraine, etc. The point I'm trying to make is that in our strategy, two things. One is, are we aware of Bangladesh coming in as strategic depth for Pakistan in lieu of Afghanistan? And what are our thoughts on how we're going to deal with that? And the second, when you address the issue in the valley, and you address the issue over young Indians and aspiring for a better tomorrow, why are they going out to the shores of India to study when so much opportunity exists for them?
My name is Saran. So I just want to make some comments, and that can be taken by anybody in the panel. The first point refers to Professor Mattoo's point that, militarily, we need to ensure that Pakistan gets the message that, we will prevail and we will hit them very hard. My only comment on that is in today's world, you can't fight more than 5 or 6 days or 7 days before you're stopped. I mean, we threw in the ceasefire approval after 4 days. So firstly, can you even have a war more than 7 days without being stopped? Secondly, to the point of Ambassador Saran, that Operation Sindoor did open our eyes in a lot of ways, and I'm sure it did, because I think our Air Force learned a lot. And also, notwithstanding what we did on the third night, the fact remains is that in today's world, if we think that we can militarily prevail in a very short war, then somebody is deluding themselves. In a very short war, it's probably very difficult to prevail militarily. So those are just comments to some of the things which was talked about. And one of the other things I want to talk about is that how come nobody's mentioned China? The China factor is very, very important whenever we talk about Pakistan, whether it is about the support or whether military support or other, and especially asymmetrical warfare. We talked about cyber warfare, we talked about other things. I mean, there is a lot of technology and support that China is coming about. So the way I look at it is that we, given the doctrine of Mr. Modi, we actually have more to lose going forward. Because if we prevail, and we've put our markers, we will prevail, we will militarily escalate. The moment you start escalating, who has something to lose? We have got more to lose. Because our economy, which is on a roll, is going to get a big hit. Nobody wants to invest in a country where every 6 months or every 1 year there is a flare-up. So forget about it. Nobody is investing in Pakistan, so they have nothing to lose. So I'm not too sure that this doctrine that we've come up with actually has been very well thought through. So these are just comments which you may want to reflect on.
Thanks. Donald Trump Jr. and Zach Witkoff are investing in Pakistan. But anyway, please, third person. I think for you. आपने हाथ उठाया था. Sorry, my apologies. Please.
My question is on military supremacy. Pakistan is about to acquire stealth aircraft from China. So should we be worried about that in terms of air supremacy?
So Chairman, could I add something to it? Because
Yes.
Ajay has the name.
Yes.
I want to make two observations. One is in connection with saying that nobody is interested now about Kashmir and internationally, and things can be settled even if we were not to make a move on that, or a substantive move. I'm not sure. I'm sure that Ambassador Saran, who based himself on his recent visit to Europe, is far more on a firmer ground. But I do feel that the impression that India did not stick by, one, the letter of accession which Maharaja Hari Singh had signed, which specifically said that referendum or people's will be undertaken when he acceded to India. The letter written to Lord Mountbatten as the Governor General. If you read the letter, you do get an impression as if it was written in Delhi itself, because it's talking about things which happened during Maharaja's visit to Delhi, and then he wrote the letter, went back, but it's nevertheless, that's the letter which India has committed even before the UN Security Council, when the issue came up there, that we would go by a plebiscite or a referendum. And would it not help India's case if we were to say that, apart from whatever Professor Mattoo mentioned about the Modi doctrine, all very valid issues, that we need to do something more? To my mind, something more means we should be mentally prepared to make a move. All right, we do not want a third-party intervention. We've stuck by it, irrespective of what Pakistan wants or others. Let's not involve anyone else. But if there were a conditional sign of a sort of an accession, or I wouldn't call it even conditional, a final succession, but giving a course of action to follow, which was that there would be ascertaining the will of the people, that's number one question. That it would add to the credibility of whatever we do post the action now. Second question has been raised about Indus Water Treaty. I think on that, the question is, it is very clear that we've said we are not going to be acting by it, unless, and that the treaty is being held in abeyance, unless it is turned, we say, by the International Court of Justice or somewhere where the Pakistan is bound to go. Because that in the past also the matter has once gone there, so the jurisdiction of ICJ in this matter of Indus Water Treaty probably is there. We may not be able to question it. So what happens there, I would say, is India doesn't go by it till it is turned down and saying India's stand is wrong. And we also know that any decision of ICJ, there is no enforcement of it. That it can be passed, but nobody knows how to implement it. So we could, no, I'm just ending by saying that we continue to do what we have objected to when we wrote to Pakistan in January 23, followed it up with it in August 24, say, or September 24, that we are not going to stand by it. We want it revised, and thereafter we have not followed already. We have not been agreeing to send any proposal for a new project, design, all that's required under the treaty to Pakistan for its consideration. We actually have already backed out. So the question is, do we have any instrument to stop the water? As of now, very few, because you do not have the storage arrangements, barrages, dams, etc. But on the run-of-the-river projects, where you do not have to create all these projects, all these civil construction, probably what Mr. Amit Shah, the Home Minister, talked of, which has been presented to by the present Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir. He said we can dig canals and increase the area where the water of the Indus River goes, and he specifically talked of Punjab, Rajasthan, can be the areas where canals can be dug. Maybe that's a quicker one. Let me stop at that.
Thank you, sir. Can I request Ambassador Pankaj Saran to address Debashish Mitra's question on Bangladesh and the students first, and then we'll go around the table.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot. I really would love to talk more with you on Bangladesh. Look, see, we always knew at a conceptual level that Sheikh Hasina is not immortal. The Awami League cannot continue to rule for the next 50 years. There will come a time when there will be a non-Hasina, non-Awami League reality in Bangladesh. We've had a good run for 15 years. So in that sense, we have internalized the prospect of a non-Awami, non-Hasina dispensation. And given the politics of Bangladesh, it would not be a secular liberal force. It would be the opposite, some variant of an Islamist force. And the Pakistanis were also waiting for that moment when you would have a non-Hasina, non-Awami. So they were also prepared, we were also prepared. Now we also know their playbook of what they intend to do or what they plan to do. So we are also preparing and we are also hardening ourselves in terms of what we need to do to protect our interests in Bangladesh. ISI presence is significantly grown since July last year, but we'll see. I mean, we'll have to deal with it. We have enough previous experience on their modalities and methods of functioning, etc. On the students, yes, you're right. Actually, there are lots of Kashmiri students, and I met them in Dhaka, studying in all kinds of medical colleges outside of Dhaka, in small little medical colleges and so on. So clearly there is a religious affinity why they're going. The Bangladeshis, by the way, have a scholarship program, and it's a very robust program where they give scholarships to Indian students, and Indian means mostly Kashmiris. So the question why they're going, it's a combination of factors, but you are right, they are there, studying there. The only thing is that we should integrate them into the mainstream. But the only thing is, I'm not sure that after the education they work in Bangladesh. They all come back. So that's the good part of it.
There's a source of indoctrination as well.
Can we do that? Can I ask General Hasnain to address Mr. Chatwal's question, one on the 4-day war, 5-day war, the China factor, and whether India is the one that really suffers when there is a war with Pakistan, because our economy is doing so well and nobody wants to invest then in a war zone.
Thank you. If I may start with, I do have an opinion on the aspect of the students. First of all, there's a dearth of seats in India, as you're aware, and cheaper perhaps, many times they say it's much cheaper to actually go to Iran or to Bangladesh. But at the end of the day, I always just wonder, you are actually opening up your young people to a tremendous amount of brainwashing perhaps, psychological affecting on the minds. Something which, and I'm not sure if anyone ever keeps a track of them. And when they come back, where do they go? This is something that we are not very good at in India, and you are 100% right. We should be doing this. We should be doing this all the time, because cultivation is something which keeps happening in this manner. To come on to the aspect of supremacy, the fight for 5 to 6 days, this was an 88-hour war, this one. At the end of the day, if you say that we have achieved deterrence, I would completely go against that argument. We have achieved no deterrence. I don't think, a lot of people said in 2016 you achieved deterrence by surgical strikes. I mean, that was a joke, absolutely, to think that you can achieve deterrence. What is happening is your messaging. You are sending a strong message, I can do this and maybe perhaps more, right? That's about all which really goes ahead in terms of dissuasion. Perhaps a message of dissuasion is going to an extent, right?
But sir, if you talk of it as a message, you actually sent a confused message, because you were not prepared for a hot war. The first choice of target wasn't militarily the best thing to do. So
I may not entirely agree with you on that. Our choice is to go for a hybrid, low-intensity response in the beginning. I'm sure we are not in a position to say that, as the argument very correct, that we are the ones to lose more. It's our economy which is going to be affected by a long drawn-out war, the Ukrainization of India, so to say. So I don't think we are in a position to do that. We think that we can perhaps, we strategize to achieve something in that period of 4, 5, 6 days of whatever kind of war fighting that you want to do. But I agree entirely with you that to achieve your overall political or military aims in that period of 5 to 6 days is virtually impossible. You can't do it. But what we have been doing is we have been calibrating since 2016. 16, you saw the surgical strikes just across the line of control. You saw Balakot in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa just about touching that with one strike. This time you went to the center of gravity of Pakistan, in a sense you went to Punjab and you hit those facilities. You did have a reasonably good damage assessment which you put out to the world also. Earlier you never had that at all. So you have been making progress. But I entirely agree with you that that is not sufficient. You have to cater for, ultimately you have to cater for a hot war. And hot war is a question of crossing red lines. The risk of crossing red lines goes up that much higher. And that's the prime reason between two nuclear powers. Otherwise, between any other countries, that kind of a thing, this kind of an action would have resulted in perhaps in a hot war situation. But being nuclear capable, both the countries, those red lines are the ones which bring in an element of caution out here. So I keep strategizing in my mind, what about the next time? And I'm quite certain there will be a next time very shortly, sometime in the near future. What then are you going to do at that time? For how many days? This time nine places, next time 12, next time 18. Is that going to be effective enough? No. So frankly saying, what Ambassador Saran started with, we all understand Pakistan, we don't know what to do with it. That's the long and short of it.
Can you address the on the China factor and the acquisition of stealth fighters?
On the aspect of the fighters, air supremacy, one of the most important factors in war, in any kind of war, even in hybrid war, air supremacy gets you everything. From a 42 to 45 Squadron Air Force, I'm not sure there's anyone from the Air Force here, 45 Squadron Air Force, you are down to a 30 Squadron Air Force, and then dwindling, and overall the technological, this thing is also not that high. Obviously you are on a back foot, there's no doubt about it, and the Pakistanis have demonstrated it fairly well this time. In terms of, I'm still waiting for a lot of analyses which will come out in the next 1 month or 2 months. There is something which I think everyone would look forward to, is an analysis by a gentleman called Air Commodore Kassar Tufail from the Pakistan Air Force, ex-Pakistan Air Force, who wrote that brilliant analogy on Kargil, and then again wrote one on Balakot. So his thing will probably come out in the near future. You will come to know a lot from that as to how exactly, what thresholds the Pakistanis have actually crossed in terms of air power. But definitely getting 5th, 6th generation aircraft in the future is going to put Pakistan on a much higher keel. There's no doubt about it. The China factor. So, no doubt, this time the Chinese men have played a very quiet role. Nothing which was very, very evident to us outside, but yet that backing was all there. There's no doubt, and Pakistan with that backing is always more emboldened. They know that as long as the Chinese interests are there in terms of the BRI, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, 11,000 men, that light division which is there to defend their interests in Gilgit-Baltistan and places like that, the Chinese will always be an important player in this game. And their presence makes all the difference.
Thank you, General. Can I request Professor Mattoo, I'll give a timeline as to when the stealth fighter will be available.
I'm not sure Pakistan can afford it at the moment. I can't say that. Nothing's.
Can I request Professor Mattoo to address Mr. Dua's questions on the instrument of accession and whether, just 1 minute, please, instrument of accession and the Indus Water Treaty, if you would like. I could also chip in on the Indus Water Treaty. But sorry, just 1 minute. What is your question, please?
Sir, I've got a question, but I'd like to reply to him that Security Council resolution of 1948 answers his question very well when it says that plebiscite to be held after the Pakistanis vacate the territory that they had.
It's a resolution of 13th August. We've all been brought up on that. But I'll ask Professor Mattoo. Yeah, you're right. Now the resolution doesn't count for anything. And plebiscite is out of the question. So let Professor Mattoo answer this.
One, I just want to address the Bangladesh question, because my next door neighbor in Srinagar, her daughter went to Bangladesh and has come back and is not indoctrinated, and she's she's a completely reasonable, good doctor who practices in Srinagar. See, the fact is that most people don't understand getting a medical seat, and General Hasnain pointed out in India today is the near impossibility for a middle class average student. It is, and there are, before we disengage from Pakistan, the Hurriyat conference in Srinagar used to make recommendations for girl and boy students to go and study in Pakistan. And there are many who are Pakistani trained medical doctors also who have come back. Bangladesh, Iran, of course, the Shia population. The other reason is for girls to go there is because of the relatively conservative atmosphere. If you want to be reasonably sure that they will get a competent education, and these institutions provide competent education, and that the girls are going to remain safe and secure, these are seen as places which can at least. I mean, it is the fact of the matter.
I come from Orissa, sir. The way Orissa is invested in higher education and
Yeah.
what we have out there, thousands of kids are coming from all over the world to study there.
Yes, sir, but you also have incidents from Nepal.
We are reaching out to give scholarships. The question is not applying our minds. We're just shutting it and saying, well.
I'm saying that there is, as someone who studied higher education, the number of medical seats available for open category students in India is fairly limited, and it is, unless you're really a topper, it's not easy. And secondly, that there have been no incidents of violence against Kashmiri students in any of these institutions. Of course, Orissa is a very, very good institution, but you also had incidents impacting on Nepalese students recently from there. But anyway, I don't want to get into that argument. Sir, the letter that you referred to, Maharaja Hari Singh never actually asked for a plebiscite. I think you need to reread that letter. All he said was, in his letter dated, I think, 25th or 26th October 1947, that I had signed a standstill agreement, or I had offered a standstill agreement, India accepted, Pakistan didn't. There hasn't been an aggression. I want to save the state. Therefore, I accede to India without reservations. I'm handing over the interim administration to Sheikh Abdullah. Thereafter, while accepting that instrument of accession, unconditionally, as was the case with hundreds of other princely states, the government of India in its wisdom said that we shall, of course, ascertain the wishes of or have a reference to the people of the state, which has happened when there was a Constituent Assembly which ratified the Constitution of India. So,
Isn't that a commitment of the government of India?
there was no commitment to plebiscite. First of all, it was a commitment internally to the people of India.
Of accepting
Yeah. So, and that, and it is giving you the law. You can go behind the spirit, and then of course everyone has its own value judgments. But there was a Constituent Assembly elected in Jammu and Kashmir, which not only ratified the accession, but also created its own constitution with linkages with the Indian constitution, which was seen as then therefore government of India conforming to the promises that it had made when it accepted the letter of accession of Hari Singh, instrument of accession of Hari Singh. Similarly, and there is a doctrine in international law, which is a doctrine, in fact, which will answer your second question, called doctrine of rebus sic stantibus. That I make a commitment today in good faith to my friend Ambassador Sinha, but if the world changes, the atmosphere changes, IISc suddenly becomes the habitat center, and that was not a commitment which I had made when I originally accepted his invitation, that I don't need to stand by those treaty commitments. That is, yeah, and that was exactly the argument that Krishna Menon made in the UN General Assembly in his marathon speech, that that commitment was an internal commitment which has been fulfilled. So therefore, any other commitment through the UN Security Council resolutions is now no longer, is ultra vires, no longer good in law. And in any case, as Mr. Singh pointed out, that was a commitment which, as Ambassador Sinha pointed out, every child or every student of political science learns on day one, is that was incumbent on Pakistan withdrawing its aggression from POK.
Can I answer your thing on the Indus Water Treaty? We're running out of time because they will.
No. So this conversation you can carry on separately. We need to ask a few questions. Can I?
Just one.
Can I?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
I'm Poonam Dabas, and I have a deep interest in strategic affairs. I've been following it. I have a small think tank also. My question is, I'm very confused. How did the ceasefire come about? Because if you look at the statements of President Trump and also the statements of Vance, 2 days ago, they had no interest in this, and then an about turn comes about. And how did India agree to it? What were our compulsions? When the Chinese, it says, I mean, what I've been reading, that we could see the Chinese Air Force standing eye to eye against India. So what actually happened behind the scenes?
Thank you. On the Indus Water Treaty, the treaty specifically, as you're aware, sir, because you're an expert on the treaty, I know you know that there are two avenues given for dispute resolution. One is the neutral expert, the other is the court of arbitration. Now, if we hold the treaty in abeyance, you're right, the World Bank, the president has said that they have no role. So what are the options? Pakistan has written to us that they want to follow up on the letter we wrote to them, which you referred to review or renegotiate terms of the treaty. But we have said in our statements that unless the faucet of terrorism is switched off, unless terrorism stops, we will keep this in abeyance. So it's a question of a chicken and egg situation. If Pakistan wants to go to the ICJ, they're welcome. They will have a problem of jurisdiction because they went in the Atlantic aircraft and it was thrown out because of jurisdiction. I suspect it will be thrown out on jurisdiction. If they go to the president of, I think who are the Lord Chief Justice of, the president of the Supreme Court, or the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, and the Lord Chief Justice of the UK, they appoint arbiters in the Court of Arbitration. If they approach them, I suspect they will get no satisfaction. So I think this is something that we will have to see how it goes. Your thing about diversion of water is absolutely correct, but the very fact that we withhold data on floods and when the monsoon is upon us, we will see the impact on Pakistan. So can we discuss this, sir, you and I, on the golf course, perhaps, on the IWT? But the lady's question, if I could request, who would take the question? Pankaj, you go, please. Yeah.
See, actually, it's very easy to start something. It's very difficult to stop it. So it's very tempting to prolong it by another day, etc. I think the answer to your question, actually, if you search deeply, lies in the nature of the Indian response on the morning of the 10th, which followed the phone conversation between Vance and the Prime Minister on the 9th night. So it all happened within 4 or 5 hours. And so the conversation between Vance and the Indian Prime Minister was something like this. I was not there, but just been told. He said, look, they're planning something, and I want to convey to you, and they're saying they're going to plan something really big. So I appeal to you, or he may have said something. There was not much of a conversation. The response given to him was, thank you very much, just go back and tell them, if they're going to hit, they're going to hit even harder, and if they want to stop, we're ready to stop. So presumably this was conveyed back, and they decided to hit. So they hit many of our airfields, etc., on the early morning hours of the 10th. That's when the full freedom was given to our people. Go for it. And there were 11 targets. And as General Hasnain is saying, you hit him in his den in Noor Khan, right, in Chaklala, which is like between Rawalpindi and Lahore. Islamabad, sorry, Rawalpindi and Islamabad. So the ferocity and the precision, and it was really precise, I've been told that, in the matter of hundreds of meters, that was the level of precision. That is when they faced, it seems, a choice that either they escalate further or they start making phone calls. And they started making the phone calls. And that's how we said, okay, if this is what they want to do, they want to stop, we've always told them we'll stop. We told them on the morning of the 7th, 15 minutes after the first strikes. But we said, we're not going to stop because you're telling us. He has to pick up the phone and tell me that he wants to stop. So that's what happened, and that's the explanation. Because otherwise, you could have gone on. I mean, after the first, I mean, you know, where do you put a stop to it?
Can I add something? You know, I have landed in Nur Khan base 5 times. It was called the PF Shaklala. The first time I landed was on the 1st of January 1994. And subsequently, thanks to the Indian Air Force, I have landed there 4 or 5 times. The significance of hitting Nur Khan Air Base cannot be underestimated, because that is the nerve center. It is like, I would say Palam, but it's a bad example because Palam doesn't have the assets that Nur Khan Air Base has. So the shock that they got, when it's not just Nur Khan, Rahim Yar Khan, Sargoda, even in Malir Cantonment, in Karachi, there were other air bases that Rafiki, they didn't expect it, and they realized, and that's when they raised the white flag. And that's how the sequence of events when they DGMO called. But again, I'm outside the government, so I don't know. Let the General Hasnain.
I fully agree with what Ambassador Saran has told, but I just want to reiterate one thing for understanding. Again, you have to go back to the fact that both nations are nuclear armed, right? And in India, unfortunately, the perception prevailed down below, and I'm sure it must be prevailing in Pakistan also, that you can go hell for leather and continue fighting for the next 10 days. I can assure you, the first of the nukes would have come on you. What would you do? A tactical nuke coming on you. Your doctrine says massive response to that. What would happen? I mean, are we prepared to vaporize 3 cities and 10 cities of theirs for this entire thing? If that be so, then you can keep fighting forever. So expect this in the future, always, let me tell you that. On the 3rd day, 4th day, maximum I'll say 5th or 6th day, this kind of a conversation will take place. And you will find normally a stoppage. The situation may change quite drastically the next time if you find a ground offensive taking place. Or for that matter, a maritime maneuver. This time we were hearing there are maritime forces all ready, etc. The moment you are nearing a blockade of Karachi, you are going to be, that's going to be a red line also. Yeah, absolutely. So you have to be very, I mean, you see, you can't measure it in simple military to military terms. There's a much bigger connotation to it.
But if we have done so well, how is it that General Munir has been promoted? UNSC
He
is
promoted
supporting
himself,
them.
Madam,
they are getting aid.
But
but India is nowhere. We have lost even the narrative.
I'm sorry, we cannot continue this conversation because we have a guillotine of 8
We'll
o'clock.
have it outside.
We'll have to do it some other time.
Thank
and
you.
by the way, General Munir, the failed field marshal, promoted himself. You should realize
I
the politics
understand
there.
that.
But
I do
anyway,
understand.
Mr. Singh, I'm sorry, we have 8 o'clock. I have been told by the India International Center that 8 o'clock is the absolute limit that you can go to.
I'll just answer one of
Can we do it outside or, you know?
Sir, very important, very important. I just want to tell you the effect of the whole game change on the night of 6th. How? Because he fired his P-15 from his own territory to aircraft which were in our territory. That was a game.
Oh, you're right. You're right. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And thank you, the panelists. I'd like to thank, thank you very much for a very enlightening discussion. Thank you.